Hello, and welcome to Chapter 3, The Silo Dilemma of Hidden in Plain Sight, Realizing the Full Potential of Middle Leaders. I'm joined today by Damien Hehir from the Shanghai Yew Chung International School in Pudong. And Damien's going to be sharing his unique insights and perspectives on how we can connect middle leaders and their teams and align them with the strategic initiatives within the school, essentially breaking down those silos and connecting them across the school. But before we kind of get into today's questions, Damien, can you give us a little personal introduction?
Yeah, so as you said, my name's Damien. I'm originally from Australia, where I spent about 10 years teaching before coming to Shanghai. I spent the first 5 years in our school in Puxi, across the river, as a teacher, and then moved to Pudong back in 2006, where I have gone through various kind of leadership roles to my current role as co-principal at school. I guess one of the things that I'm really passionate about is developing middle managers or leaders, and so I'm really pleased that you've asked me to do this, and I'm looking forward to contributing my ideas to your book.
Great, I really appreciate that. And Damien, I have to admit, you were one of the first people I thought about for these interviews, because I remember my very first middle leadership workshop that I ever did for schools, you actually coordinated. So to think that was 8 years ago, and here we are reflecting on the development of middle leaders is just really brings it full circle for me. So, hey, getting into it, first question I have for you is, how have you set up your middle management teams to break down the silos?
So I think we have, like all schools, we have, middle management teams and running different sections. But what we've found really successful is the setting up of professional learning communities. A few years ago, we put together our 3-year plan, and we had a number of goals, 12 major goals that we came up with. And we felt the best way to address them was through PLCs to kind of meet those goals. So a number of those goals included things like parent engagement, alumni. We were working on child protection and those types of things. So we basically put these groups together, and most of them were vertical. So they went across the school. They involved staff in different sections, from early childhood, primary, and secondary. In different areas of the school, rather than just in subjects or sections. So that worked really well for us. What we did, one of the interesting discussions we had was that we, in the past, we had these professional learning communities that were compulsory, and we asked everyone to be on one of them. And we had some feedback, from years gone past, where the chairs often said, they weren't working so well because there were people who really clearly didn't want to be on it, and they were just there because they had to. So what we did is we had a lot of debate about whether we should make them optional or not. And our worry was, if we did and no one wanted to be on it, what would we do? So we took a bit of a risk, but we felt that there was enough people who were passionate about it that would kind of join one of these committees. So it was really interesting. We ended up having something like 90% of our staff actually joined one, which was fantastic. And then the feedback was far more positive because they had opted to be on it. No one had forced them to be on it. They were able to choose something that was an interest to them, that they felt passionate about. And so obviously their input was far greater. So so I think that's kind of worked for us. Obviously there's a lot of things still have to be set up, still have to have a chair, you have to have agendas in place, and teams had to set norms. So all those kind of things are still really important. There had to be structure. We couldn't just let the groups go off and do their thing without some kind of structure in place and some kind of oversight and feedback and all that type of thing. So yeah, that kind of worked well for us. So that's kind of our main way of meeting school-wide goals is through these committees. One thing I would add is that we also, through this COVID-19, have had a lot of changes in the way we operate through through the online work that we've done, and we found a lot of innovation happened during that time. So we've actually set up a new PLC for next year, with that in mind. So whenever we want to take on a new school goal, we'll usually do it through a committee of people who are interested, and already, you know, we had a really huge sign up. We had to kind of reduce the numbers just to make it workable. But that will be another team that we'll monitor next year, and hopefully they'll come up with some new ideas, which they can then bring back to our kind of upper leadership team to look through.
That's great. I mean, some of the things I reflect on based on what I know about your school as well is that your strategic planning process is very inclusive. So it makes sense to me that people want to be involved in those PLCs because they participated in the conversations that, you know, from which they were born. And then when you think about COVID-19 and really celebrating what's going good, I mean, who doesn't want to be a part of like a good story, right? So there's some great takeaways there that I hope other leaders get from this particular video. Now, one thing I think about here is like, all right, great. We've set the foundation. We have these teams. They are interdisciplinary. They got, you know, leaders and teachers from different departments. So it's great. They can share ideas, take those ideas back into their team. But how do you as a senior leader ensure that these teams now act in a coherent way to realize that strategic direction that you've set for them?
I think one of the most important things is that there is alignment and that we're kind of all working together. So I think it's as a leader, as a senior leader of the school, I've got to kind of provide clarity to the teams and make sure that that they understand, you know, what's kind of expected as well. I think I also need to manage kind of expectations as well, because sometimes people would love to, you know, hire new staff or, you know, bring in a new idea that's going to cost thousands or whatever, or it might actually not align with our school's direction. And you know, as much as we like to bring in new ideas, it's got to be kind of manageable and within our plan. You know, we've already got a plan that we've all agreed on, and we have to kind of stick to that. One of the things that I guess, or an article that I read was by Patrick Lencioni, a book called The Advantage. And what was really impactful when I read that was he talks about a healthy organization where the members of the team, their first loyalty is to the team they're in rather than the team they lead. And I thought that was really, really important because, you know, so I lead a team of we've got 2 campuses. I've got two lots of VPs. Now, if their commitment or their loyalty is to the whole school, then there'll be times when they are willing to give something up because they know the other section needs it or the other department. So it might be staffing, it might be budget or whatever, because it's best for the whole school. So if you have these departments and their loyalty is just to their department, the leader's loyalty to the performing arts department or the math department or their year level, then they're going to be kind of fighting for their part of the school or their division or their section, and often it's not what's, you know, best for the whole school. So we've tried to really, I took that on board, and I've really tried to embrace that kind of philosophy and pass it on to others, that, you know, to be loyal to the school and what's best for the school and what's best for the section over their own kind of individual department. Or I think in your book you refer to them as silos, so trying to get away from this is my part of school, this is all I'm worried about, to, you know, what's best for all of us. And if the organization, not just at school level, even above, so if my loyalty is to the whole organization rather than just my school, then I think, you know, that's best for everybody as well. So it kind of works from, you know, right across the organization.
That's amazing, because I mean, what you just really brought out in great detail was what I talk about, having a middle leadership team. But a middle leadership team in itself can exist in many different forms. You know, you've talked about having like a curricular leadership team. You might have that, you know, your VPs working in a senior leadership team in cooperation with yourself or other senior leaders. But what's important is that what I see in some schools, often that curriculum leadership team or that head of department team, they're a team in name, but they're really just there to come together, have something reported to them, then go back into their teams and try to make sense of it. What really stands out for what you've done is you've taken that extra initiative to develop them as a team, making sure that their loyalty is to each other. And I think that's an additional great resource now that we can comment on, is that Patrick Lencioni article. So I really appreciate you adding that to the discussion. My last question for you is, I don't want people going away thinking, oh, is the answer having one more team, or is the answer going to be me having to take on, some additional administrative responsibilities or duties to make this all work? From your experience, what has made this work for you? What are some of the tools that you're using that you've found that have really helped you realize the impact that you're getting?
Okay, I think it comes back to the strategic plan we mentioned before, and we really involved all our leaders in that process. So I think there was kind of, they all felt ownership of it. And one of the biggest challenges I had was making sure it was manageable for the leaders, because a lot of them wanted to be in 3 or 4 teams, which is kind of beyond what was reasonable for them. I mean, we've got to be mindful of their life balance, work balance, and be fair to them. And sometimes, we had to say thanks for being in 3 or 4, but maybe just focus on these, 1 or 2. But, I found that if people are really passionate about something, they won't worry about so much about time. They won't worry about, am I getting a financial incentive or this kind of thing. People are passionate about something, they'll really want to be a part of it. And I've found that myself. If I'm passionate about something, I'll think nothing of spending a Saturday working on it, or going home and in the evening, late into the evening, working on this thing, because I really believe in it and it's really something that's important to me. So I felt, taking it right back to the start where we talked about the strategic plan, if all the staff are kind of really into it and they want what's best for the school, then I think people are, really wanting to be a part of these kind of groups. That's why I think when we became optional, we didn't have any problem, having people kind of sign up for them. So, so I think it's about just being fair to them, to make sure that, they do have some release time if you can arrange it, and, that they do have some support if they need it as well. I mentioned about managing expectations. I think that's, they've got to be clear on what we can hope to get out of this, because when they're not clear, sometimes it can go off in a completely different direction, and then time gets wasted. So I think that clarity for people is really, really important. One of the things that's come out of this COVID-19 situation I've mentioned before is this innovation of the way people are communicating. And during this time, we had staff meetings where we had 50, 60, 70 people, joining meetings through Zoom. And we all became kind of experts. Our leaders became experts at chairing meetings that had, huge amounts of people. We used the breakout room function, which was great on Zoom, where we were able to say, okay, put a couple of questions to them. They'd go off into their groups and come back and feed back. So all the kind of things you would do normally, we were kind of doing on Zoom as well. So because we've got 2 campuses, and we've got campuses in Puxi as well that we work with, we're looking at doing more kind of meetings this way, to save people's time of going across, getting in cars after school and finding a taxi to come to the other campus to do a meeting. And same with going across the river. If we ever had a meeting over there, it's an hour there, an hour back, kind of just wasted time. But we've found that we can have, really effective meetings where we're sharing our agenda and all that, through the screen share on Zoom. So we're looking at more of these kind of cross section kind of meetings, but using technology to do them. So yeah, I think that will be helpful going forward.
That's really great with what you shared with us today, Damien. If I can kind of connect back to some of the points that we've made, one of the things that's really important is aligning our middle leaders to those strategic initiatives that are really important to us as a school and an organization, a community. How your school achieves that is by being very inclusive in that process. You help to really instill within them what Michael Fullan would call the moral purpose. And by doing so, you're able to elicit a greater commitment from them. But being a very responsible leader, you also have to be realistic in terms of what they can take on. And part of that realism, also something that I talk about in the book, is that not everybody may be ready for change. They might still be, addressing other issues or challenges that doesn't allow them to participate in that PLC, but it doesn't mean they're not connected or want to support the school. It's just not their time right now. So we also need to be realistic about what people can take on. And then lastly, what you really have been talking about is responsiveness and flexibility, and giving your staff that opportunity to really participate in a way that's personal to them, and being able to contribute their strengths, not dictate or prescribe what you need them to bring to the table. Damien, again, I just want to really thank you for today's conversation. I got a lot out of it, and I know those that have read this chapter and are going to be looking at this study guide are going to really appreciate what you brought to the table as well today. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you very much.